Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a hub chat for the month of March 2021. Wowzers, I can't believe we're here. It's pretty exciting tonight because we have a special guest with us, Tracy Secombe, who is the founder of the Soul Pleaser program. She is joining us tonight to tell us a little bit about her experiences in life and a few of her unbelievable insights into how we operate as women, particularly. But before I start quizzing her about all of these wonderful insights, I just want to acknowledge that we have a Miss Australia with us. Tracy, I did not know that you were Miss Australia. Was it for 1997? Is that right?
It was 1997. Yeah, not usually something you mention when you meet someone, but yes.
I think that deserves mentioning. High five for you. That is epic. I don't think I've ever interviewed or met a Miss anyone. So for you to be Miss Australia, I can just imagine. Was it the date? Like, did you have fluoro zinc on and bikinis and all that sort of jazz?
No, so it was way past that.
Oh.
I was 28 and I was like the ambassador for the spastic centres. So I travelled around Australia as their spokesperson. So
Fantastic.
yeah, not a bikini in sight.
Oh, geez, we missed that era. What a shame.
Yeah.
Well, now, Tracy, I have been looking into a little bit about what you do, obviously, since we decided to do this hub chat. And once you said what you did in transitioning and helping people realize they're going from a people pleaser to a soul pleaser, my ears just pricked up and thought, oh, that is just so amazing. That is just so important because I'm like the world's worst people pleaser and I need you in my life right away. However, this is like one of many wonderful projects that you have and programs that you have put together throughout your life. You have owned businesses from a very young age. You have coached people for a very long time. And it's all sort of come together into this wonderful program called Soul Pleaser. Can you just tell us, firstly, I suppose, what has brought you to this point today? So, how did it all begin? I mean, you've had lots of different career paths, but obviously all servicing people. I just saw that when I was looking at all these businesses. I'm going, this girl just tries to find a need and fill it. So what's led you to this point now, being the founder of such an important program like Soul Pleaser?
So Soul Pleaser was born out of what appeared to be tragedy at the time, and that's often the case. Something service-oriented and something life-changing and wonderful often comes out of something that feels very challenging at the time. And I remember when I went away to boarding school, and I know many of you may have gone to boarding school or your kids do, that a friend of mine's back home, I grew up in the country in South Australia, and one of my best friends back home, her mum died very soon after I moved away from home. So I was homesick enough. And then my best friend's mum died. And I remember feeling guilty. And I don't know if anyone can relate to this, because I was so upset because it made me afraid that my mum might die. You know, like I was like so sad for my friend, but equally at the age of 15, I thought, oh, mums die when you're young. And, you know, that's the worst thing that could ever happen is if my mum died. So anyway, mum lived for a very long time and died 5 years ago in 2016. And that was the real turning point for me when mum died, because a year earlier, when her breast cancer had spread into her lungs and we were overseas and I got the message from my sister, I made a mental note to myself. I thought, right, mum might not have long left, you know, and so I'm going to take her out to lunch every Friday. I didn't say it to anyone. I said it to myself. And at the time I was running 3 businesses. So being a people pleaser meant that if people wanted more of me, I said yes to them. I'm like, yes, I can help. And so I had run a physiotherapy business by then. I ended up running it for 22 years, but it was close to that at the time. And I'd taken on another 2 businesses, and I was just answering messages to my clients from the moment I woke up in the morning until the moment I went to sleep at night. And I realize now when I look back, I was burnt out. But at the time, I thought I was fine. That was just how I functioned. had no idea really. And I didn't take my mum out to lunch every Friday. You know, I saw her, but I didn't keep that promise to myself. And when she died, I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, why couldn't you make that a priority? And I realized that this need for keeping other people happy and getting approval from people and helping other people improve their lives to the detriment of my own life was people pleasing. And I realized that my mum was a serial people pleaser too. And a lot of her illness and her burnout came from serial people pleasing. She was the mum, and some of you will relate to this. Like, I remember my cousin had a baby when she was 16. So she moved in with us. Like, everybody came to us. Everybody came and lived with us. Like, no matter what the problem was, you could count on my mum. And she was a nurse right up until she died. She died at 75. She was still nursing when she died. She'd go to the patients' funerals. You know, she made friends with all their family. She'd be really upset when a patient died. Like, she just was an empath and a people pleaser, and so was I. And I just realized that what I wanted to do was break the chain for her, for my nana, for every generation behind me, and every female to come in the future, to stop this people pleasing, because I was already seeing it in my own daughters. So that's how it came about. I used to be a people pleaser. I need to be a soul pleaser. And so I did it myself. And then I decided to help other women do it as well.
Yeah, it's such an interesting way of operating. And so I suppose when I think of it and I hear your mum's story, I think, wow, what a martyr, you know, like what an amazing human being.
Yeah.
I know that comes at a cost, but can you, and this is diverging from what my plan of asking was, but you'll be fine with it, Tracy.
Totally.
How do you do both? How do you, really service in the way that you want to, and service that passion? And some people have a real passion for helping others, but how do you also preserve some of yourself? I mean, that must be so difficult.
Yeah, and I think that has been the missing ingredient for women for so many years, and particularly women in the country. My mum grew up on a farm, and it was just what every woman did. And so it was revered. You know, at mum's funeral, people came up to me and said, "You're so much like your mother." And it was a compliment. And I felt this pressure to live up to this pedestal that my mother was on for being such a martyr. But they didn't see her behind closed doors. And I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but sometimes when we're being so much to the community and so much to our clients and to everybody that knows us, we've got to let off steam somewhere. And my husband jokes and calls it the street angel and the house devil, because, you know, like, we are not angels. Like, we come across like angels, but, you know, we've all got emotions and we all get tired. And so mum often had migraines, and my nana did, and I inherited them as well. And the migraine is like a symptom of trying to be perfect for everybody out there and being of service, and just taking too much on, and something's got to give. And so the shift that I've made and my clients are making and have made is that we actually become of more service when we change our why. So what I believe a people pleaser is somebody who needs the validation, needs the approval, and for people to think that you're nice and to think that you're a good girl. You know, we haven't grown out of it, even though we're women. And we often grow up as being good girls. And I had a great childhood. Like, you know, my family were lovely to me, but I became very addicted to the compliments. I became very addicted to "you're doing a good job, Tracy." I was like, I want more of that. I want more of that. And so I just became a bit obsessed with being a good girl. But in terms of how you do it all, the way that you can still be of service, and even of more service, is that your why becomes for the joy of it, rather than needing their response back, needing the gratitude, needing people to sort of applaud you or pat you on the back for it, not doing it because you think you should. How many times has yes slipped out of your mouth before you're even sure what you're signing up for, and you've even considered whether you can fit it into your calendar? You just say yes, like on automatic pilot, and then later it's not a true yes. You didn't mean it. Like, and that's the worst yes, because that's a yes with resentment. So a yes that you own because you know who you are, you know what you want, you know what your goals are, you know where you're going, and you buy some time when somebody asks you to do something and say, look, can you just let me have a think about that? And then you see whether it fits in with your calendar, if it fits in with your goals, your values, the path that you're on, and then you can come back with a measured response. But the big thing is that we just leave ourselves out of the equation. We're helping everyone else except ourselves, and we're on the bottom of our priority list. And it's that shift that allows you to still be of service to people.
I am sure there's a lot of heads nodding at the moment, and mine is definitely. It's so mature, isn't it? Like, it's such the higher order of thinking that we always want to be that person that's measured and a little bit more thoughtful before we jump into things, and a little bit more mature about when we say yes or no. It's like when, I'm 44 and I don't think I'm mature enough to do that yet. So it's so weird when you say it, you think, I should be old enough now to say no. But for some reason, we are just conditioned to almost say, yes, I'll do that. I'll help out and I'll be there. And yes, I can do that. And it's almost a disappointment to ourselves when we do say no. However,
Yeah.
what you're saying is about stopping and thinking and giving it some time. And maybe it's a yes and maybe it's a no. And that just seems like such a sensible way of doing things.
Yeah. And it's so easy, isn't it, to realize something, to understand it intellectually and say, yes, I agree with that. It's a completely different thing, which because you're coaching people to exercise, to make it habitual, because our habits are automated. And so you're not thinking through this process before you say yes. You're doing what you've always done, showing up the way you've always shown up. The other thing that happens is that you create this wonderful surroundings of people who expect you to show up the way you've always shown up. And so you feel this high expectation of the person that's always on the board or always on the committee. Oh, ask Tracy, she'll say yes, and you pride yourself in that statement where if you want something done, ask a busy person. Yeah, that's me. Aren't I great? I'm so busy. Look what I can get done. You just live up to this name that you get for yourself where you're the go-to person. And so there's also some fear of letting people down. I think that's one of the big reasons that we say yes when we mean no, because we don't want to let other people down. And in fact, once Mum died and I became very aware that I was burning out, something that I'd been in denial for years, I think. I put a happy face sticker on it. Everybody thought I was happy, but deep down I was anxious and I was overthinking, and I was waking up at 2:00 in the morning or 4:00 in the morning and going through my to-do list. And I was lying in bed with my husband, and there was one of the 3 businesses that I didn't want to do anymore. It was really exhausting me, and it just didn't feel like it matched me anymore. I didn't feel aligned with it. And I kept saying to him, I don't want to do it anymore. And you know what blokes are like? He's like, well, just stop. And I'm like, don't be so stupid. Like, it's not that easy, And he goes, it is. And I said, I don't have a choice. And I think back to those words, and so often we think we don't have a choice. And the big awakening for me is that we always have a choice. We're always choosing. And just because I chose that 6 or 7 years earlier doesn't mean that I couldn't change my mind and say that I don't want to do it anymore. And he said, why won't you leave? And I said, I don't want to let people down. And so anyway, I did leave, and I did let people down. And this girl rang me and she said, I've never had my heart broken before, but now I have. This is my worst fear. I didn't want to let anyone down. But she stepped up and became the leader that she was never going to be while I was there, because she relied on me. I promise you that when you tune into your soul, it is always the highest good for all. It's not selfish. If you trust yourself and you trust that pull that is your intuition or your inner truth, it will be good for everyone, not just you. So it takes a bit of getting used to.
Yeah, it takes courage. It takes, guts to know that there's something else planned for you. This isn't going to be your end story. And I think because we're all, very much in tune of knuckling down and getting it done and muscling through the tough times. And I mean, one of my favorite quotes was, when you knock on the door of opportunity, remember it is work that answers. And, that work can sometimes be that commitment to work can be absolutely, burnout central. It can lead you down a very scary path. So it's so, I suppose, you know, lots of people listening, Tracy, will be thinking, oh, wow, I can resonate with so many of these different things. What are the red flags that you see? I mean, do you see people pleasers everywhere you go now? Like you just, oh my goodness me, she's going to say, are you spying on people pleasers everywhere? What are the red flags that you see in people, you know, that they might be at the beginning? I mean, even in kids, I mean, we see it in our own kids. I know the kids that, I call them the little dogs that need to be patted all the time. And then there's the cats that don't really need a pat. So it's just interesting to see what those red flags are for you now that you have this insight.
Yeah, it's so true. And quite often, if your mother was a people pleaser and you're a people pleaser, you will see it in your daughters, maybe not both of them if you have more than one. And you might see it in your sons too. So it depends on their sensitivity level, really, and how sensitive they are. But one of the red flags is saying sorry all the time. So I've got a friend who, you know, we're really close, and as a group of friends we always tease her because she's forever saying sorry, and there's nothing wrong with saying sorry, but it's just out of her mouth constantly because she's very apologetic. Another one is that you rehash. So do you ever find yourself rehashing a conversation? So you go over the conversation in your mind, you think about what you said, and you worry about the interpretation that the other person made of that conversation. And you wonder what they're thinking and whether you hurt their feelings or you offended them, which is not what you meant. And you turn yourself inside out thinking, you know, I hope I haven't upset them. For me, that was probably the one that literally did my head in the most, because that makes you feel anxious, that worrying. And that is very similar to worrying in general, because worry is all about thinking worst case scenario, which is future paced, but it's based on something that happened in the past, and you're worried that in the future or now they're actually thinking something bad about you. Another one is that you numb yourself. So there is lots of ways that we avoid feeling, because part of the reason we people please is we replace any awareness or any consideration of our own emotions by being worried about everybody else's emotions. So we don't go into our own heart. We stay in our head. It's very safe to stay in your head because you can't get your heart broken if you stay in your head. And so we lose that ability to be able to monitor and do anything about our emotions, which means we end up on an emotional roller coaster. So for those of you ladies who are listening, who can relate to emotions being up and down? Who would say that you're emotional and you're up and down? And the reason being is because you actually need things to go a certain way for you to feel good. So you're trying to keep everyone else happy, but your happiness actually relies on them being happy. So, you know, if your kid is unhappy, you're unhappy, and you can't be happy unless they're happy. And we're trained to think that that's what being a good mum is. But how are we ever going to be happy if our emotions are relying on the emotions of kids? You know, of course, they're going to be up and down with their emotions. So we end up being as up and down emotionally as they are. So there's some of the red flags of people pleasing that could be detrimental to your own happiness.
Wow. Do you have to have all three of them to be a people pleaser?
No, you could just have one.
Yeah. I am really interested, from the great audience that's on tonight of Hubbers, just put in the chat box if you can resonate with any of those red flags. So first of all, it was the constantly sorry. Is that the first one, Trace? Yep. And then the second one was the rehashing conversations like, oh, I hope I didn't offend them. Or, geez, I wonder if they thought this about me. I hope it didn't sound like that, which actually, you know what, that's the worst thing for that is actually text messaging. And, it would just drive that person nuts. And I'm talking like it's not me, it's a friend, but it would just drive that person nuts, wouldn't it? So, yeah, and then the last one was about what was the last one again, Tracy? About not
numbing yourself. So you're so busy keeping everybody else happy, and you're so worried about their emotions that you numb yourself. And I didn't go on to say about some of the ways that we numb ourselves. So we numb ourselves with food, we numb ourselves with alcohol, We numb ourselves with scrolling Facebook. We numb ourselves by being addicted to our to-do lists and keeping ourselves busy constantly. So I'd be interested also to see who numbs themselves how with those processes.
So that includes the people that sort of, you know, when you want to talk about them, they want to talk about you.
Yeah.
Enough about me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not that bad, or don't worry about me, more about you. Is that sort of conversation?
It can be, but it's very much about when you offer your service. So going back to this way that a people pleaser services compared to a soul pleaser is that you're trying to help and you feel like you're failing if there isn't a change in the person that you're trying to help, as if you're responsible for how they feel. And so when you're a soul pleaser, what you understand is I am responsible for my emotions and everybody else is responsible for those. And the best way that I can help people is by learning how to manage and control my own emotions. And when I feel good, that is infectious. Like that is inspiring to the people around me. And I can offer some inspired words to somebody because I'm feeling so good, I feel inspired. And so the words that come out of my mouth might be inspiring. But if I have any attachment to what somebody does with those words, then I'm relying on somebody else for my sense of self. And that's a slippery slope because I might come across someone. Classic example, when I was going up to the retreat, I usually manifest sitting next to somebody who is awesome and we have a fantastic conversation. But there was something else that I needed to do that on that trip. And I sat next to the grumpiest man I've ever met in my life. And he was, when the lady was up trying to do the safety thing, he was going, oh, for God's sake, as if I haven't heard this before. Like he was yelling, you know, this guy next to me. So anyway, the old me would have got anxious and I would have felt somehow responsible for his anger. And I probably would have tried to say soothing things to him. And instead, I got my earphones and I plugged them in and I meditated. Not my problem. And so I had a lovely plane trip and he calmed down. Like he actually calmed down. But for me to take on that responsibility, we don't normally do it with strangers. I was a serial people pleaser. I people pleased taxi drivers and everyone, but a lot of people just people please people they care about. But we just can't take on that responsibility. It's impossible.
Well, there's a lot of responses there in the chat box of people resonating with your classifications. I am sure that everybody is at least one of those. I want to sort of now ask you, because you have husband, you have children. How does this people pleasing affect those relationships? Like, what was some? I mean, you alluded to it before about being the angel on the street and the devil in the house. You know, what else can we see ourselves doing as people pleasers when it comes to our kids and our relationships?
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge. Like that is one of the things that the ladies who are working with me say is how much better their relationships get, because as a people pleaser, often we learn to swallow our truth because we want to keep the peace and we want to avoid confrontation. And so for me growing up, my mum and dad used to fight a lot, and my dad would pack his bags and say that he was leaving. And I was very young, and my brother and I, we would sit on the front porch crying, begging him to stay, and he would leave. And then the next day he'd come back. So I sort of got that fear of rejection thing. And so I learned that people can leave. And so my husband has always been fantastic and has never been a flight risk. But I had inherited this fear of rejection. And so I would just go along with him and I wouldn't speak up and say what I really wanted to do. And so something simple like this, and some of you may relate to this exact example. So when I stopped being a people pleaser 5 years ago, we sat down one night to watch something on TV. And so he's flicked it on and it was the normal, you know, shoot 'em up movie. And I've gone, do you know what? I don't really want to watch this. And he goes, what do you mean? You love these movies. I'm like, actually, I hate them. And, you know, we've been married for 20 years and now I tell him that I hate them. Like, they nearly give me a heart attack. Like, I'm like hiding my eyes, blocking my ears, you know, I can't bear it. But all those years keep him happy. That's what he wants to watch. I like having the time with him on the couch. Like just that not speaking up, you know. And like if we lose part of ourselves because we're keeping other people happy, then it's not true happiness that we have, because we're not being true to ourselves. So definitely I now speak my truth. And, you know, at first when the ladies I'm working with are starting to do this, they go, oh, my husband doesn't really like me speaking my truth. And I'm like, wait till you're feeling really good. Wait till he's feeling really good. Don't be like a volcano, because this is what people pleasers do. And some of you will relate to this. So you don't speak up, you keep the peace, you keep the peace, and then you crack it because you're so mad by the time you finally say what you really want to say. So bit by bit, you start to just gently, calmly know what's true for you. And I think the other thing that can happen is that you lose your identity and your opinion. And so you don't even know what's true for you. You're like, I'm so used to going along with everybody else, I don't know what's true. And then people pleasing kids, we people please our kids a lot because we are, first of all, people pleasing our parents by parenting in some ways the way our parents did. So we say things like, you know, I'm never going to be like my mum. And then one day we go, oh my God, I'm just like my mum. Or worse, if your husband's brave enough, he says it and says, you're just like your mum, and then you kill him. So we start to parent in a way that we are people pleasing our parents, even though they're not there looking at us, by doing these things that they did. And then we people please our kids because we give them everything. We give them every opportunity. So we run them to basketball and football and swimming, and we're burnt out, we're dying because we're running around driving them. And you girls on the farms are driving so much further, like to get them to all these things. A, because we want everybody else in the community to see what a great super mum we are because our kids do everything. B, we don't want to say no to our kids. And in the end, we're just exhausted. So I don't know if anybody here can relate to that.
Well, all you need to do is spend a week at Distance Ed to hear, you know, the lengths that mums go to. And, you know, in one sort of way, it's wonderful. But then
Yeah.
I also compare that to what mums did years ago, and they kept it simple at home. And there was a little bit more of self-preservation. No, you can't go in every week because it takes us 2 hours. I mean, yeah, and now because we have, you know, so much access to other things, we sort of have become like, oh, we need to be in that, and we need to be in this, and we need to take them there. So yeah, I totally understand. I think everybody listening will be going, oh yeah, we've done the miles with school sport or taking kids in and out of town for certain things. But yeah, it sometimes is at the detriment of our own energy and clarity when they get home. And it's like, well, I've just driven you 5 hours to sport. There's no way I'm putting up with any bad behavior. And in fact, you're out for the rest of the day. You know, I've got nothing left.
Exactly. And it's not that you're going to suddenly stop doing these things. It's just that you're going to tune in and find that balance. Like, where do I fit in here? With the priority list, this is the way it used to be for me. So for me, because I was a business owner all my life since I was 18, business was first, family was second, which sounds terrible, makes me sound like a terrible mother, but that's the truth. So business, family, me, right at the bottom. And where it is now, which might also sound selfish, is me, family, business. And the reason that you need to be at the top is because if you don't fill up your cup, there is nothing to overflow for you to be able to genuinely give to your family. And in the end, you give out of exhaustion and resentment. And that's what drives you apart. That's what, you know, when your husband comes in after being out on the harvester all day and, you know, wants to kiss you on the cheek, you want to punch him in the face because you've had the kids all day, you know, and he doesn't have a clue. So it's resentment. Like, yes, you're doing it, but deep down you're resenting it. So it's just a matter of really starting to get some balance so that you don't miss out in your life.
Okay, so I've got a question for you. How do you work through the mother's guilt? The mother's guilt of putting yourself first, and it should be about the kids, or it should be servicing your partnership business, and I feel so guilty because I'm indulging in a weekend away. How do you overcome the mother's guilt?
So it gets easier once you start to get some results. So the hardest is when you first start to do it. But you're going to have to trust me on this. So my whole family would say that I am a much better mother now that I've started to put myself first. And I also want to have the caveat that my children are now 22, 21, and 15, which is very different to if they're toddlers. So if you've got 3 toddlers, it's very difficult for you to put yourself first because, you know, you wake up when they wake up. So I'm not expecting you to do anything impossible. But when I say making yourself a priority, what I actually mean is making how you feel a priority. Because if you wake up and you feel exhausted and your vibration is low, then that's what you're going to take into your day. And it's just going to deplete and deplete and deplete. Whereas if you can open your eyes first thing in the morning and go, my goal is to feel as good as I can before I take my first bit of action, so that the action becomes inspired by feeling good. So your priority, you being number one, means how I feel is my number one priority, because the better I feel, the better my whole family feels, the better I can function, the more capable I am of taking these actions that need to be taken, rather than dragging myself into these actions. And it may not be first thing in the morning. You might be the sort of person that jumps out of bed in the morning, but by after lunch or by school pickup, you're starting to tire, you're starting to fatigue, or by the time you come home from all the sport and you're about to cook dinner, that's when you're starting to fatigue. And if you learn some tools where you can do even a 5-minute realignment tool or exercise where you can get back to feeling better, you're going to be better for them and better for yourself. So yeah, so the priority doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go and spend hours on yourself, you know, and neglect your kids. I am lucky enough to get up in the morning and spend an hour walking down the beach without my children before I start the school run and things like that. But not everybody can do that. So that the guilt, I think, is knowing that they're going to be better off if you look after yourself. So there's nothing to be guilty about because everybody wins.
Now, you're obviously very driven in business. You're clever, you're focused, you've got a purpose. There's a lot of women on the call tonight that I know have really highly committed businesses. And so at times, I think everyone feels like they have to throw themselves into that career and just work really hard at achieving the goals in that career. And that can sometimes be to the detriment of their own health and well-being. Are you in that spot now? Are you in the sweet spot now, Tracy? Have you been through times like that before where it's just all about the work and you said it was the top of your priority, and then all of a sudden you've realized it's just not and it shouldn't be?
Yeah, so I am in the sweet spot now, but I don't want to say anything that's unrealistic. So I want to be really real with you. So even though the realization came in the year after my mum died, she died in the January, so it was a slow burn that this all became apparent to me. I actually launched from people pleaser to soul pleaser in January 2017, so 12-month anniversary after mum had died. And so I very gradually, step by step, introduced these changes. But the sweet spot that I'm in now is that I am able to, and it is partly because of the age of my kids, so I couldn't have done this when the kids were younger. I'm able to be very present with my family in the morning. Once they're off to work, university and school, then I'm here and I'm working. And then this is an exception. Here I am at 8 o'clock, usually from 9 till 3. And then I'm pick up and doing the kids' stuff and being present with the cooking and things like that. But what I would say when you've got younger children is that it's all about getting to know yourself and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And also, we have this real need, and I was definitely like this. I grew up with a mum who worked. She was a nurse and my dad was an entrepreneur. And so it was just in me to be very independent. So by the time I met my husband, I already had a very successful business, and I never, ever wanted to rely on a man. I never wanted to ask a man for money ever. And so I work with some women who are like that, very fiercely independent, and I get that. And so at the retreat on the weekend, a lady who is actually probably in her early 60s. We were talking about what we want. And she said, I work 5 days a week as a hairdresser, and I would like to cut down to 3 days a week. And I said, why don't you? And she said, because I want my independence. And I said, what does that mean? And she says, I don't want to ask my husband for money. She said, we've got plenty of money. And I said, do you want to be right? Or do you want to work 3 days a week? Do you want to be proud? Or do you actually want to just work 3 days a week? Does it matter where the money comes from? And she just let go of it. Like, she just went, you're right, and just let go of it. So I just ask you to get to know yourself and ask yourself, what am I trying to prove? And who am I trying to prove it to? And also notice the season of your life. Like, I'm going to be 52 tomorrow. I'm very excited to be talking to you on the eve of my birthday. And so this season of my life is so lovely at 52. Like, I just feel like I can relax. But when you're in your 40s, it's different. You know, there's all this drive and there are all these things to do. But if you just realize that the seasons change and that you change and it's not forever, and just check in with yourself. Am I really doing what I want to do? Or am I doing what I think I should do? That's how you end up in the sweet spot, I think, is trust yourself.
Yeah, and we're seeing it really, aren't we? We're seeing all of these amazing women in their 50s create amazing products, businesses. There's actually, a little bit more space for them to be themselves and to show who they truly are, and they're taking those chances, and it's super cool. It means that I can be a fitness trainer for a little bit longer, which is exciting too.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I went to see Neil Donald Walsh. He's the author of the Conversation with God series for my 50th birthday. That was my birthday present to myself. I went to America and saw him. And he's 75, still writing books. And I just was so inspired by him. Like, retirement to me is to continuing to do what you love when you want to. Like, there's no need to do it. You just do it because you love it. But when your kids are younger, there are things that need to be done. So, it's just accepting that you're choosing these things because you love seeing your kids having these opportunities. It's just that clarification. Am I doing what I really love and I really want to do it? Yeah.
So how do you find it if you don't really know what it is? And I know Jodie asked this question in the chat box, and I think it's really good to think about that, because a lot of people don't know. They might have been people pleasers for such a long time, they've actually lost sight of what they really want. And do we have to find it? Sometimes we sort of tend to rush it and want to find it straight away. What am I going to fill my cup with? It's got to come to me. So what are your thoughts on that, Trace?
Well, I have a different definition of it. I think a lot of people think that purpose is what we do and what we do for a living. So I think that we've just defined it too specifically. And I think what fills our cup and what lights us up is anything that feels good. So it might be looking at a butterfly, or planting a flower in the garden, or walking along the beach. So the more that we actually find something that brings you joy, even if it's something really small, because of the law of attraction, like attracts like. So the fact that you've actually valued yourself enough to say, I am going to look for things I love. That is what I'm going to do. I'm going to look for things I love. When Damien and I were having this argument about me leaving this business, he goes, you need a hobby. And at the time, when I was running 3 businesses and 3 kids, and I managed our investment properties, and, I was just a lunatic. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I thought he was just an idiot. But now I realize that hobbies are fantastic, but I never gave myself permission ever to do something just for the fun of it. It always had a bigger purpose than that. It was always a means to an end. I was doing it to get fitter. I was doing it to lose weight. I was doing it to get stronger. I was doing it to earn more money. I was doing it to get ahead in my career, to help someone else, to, there was always this ulterior motive, not just for the fun of it. And life is amazing, even if you can start off 5 minutes a day doing something just for the fun of it. And what will happen is one thing will just lead to another. And that's really how Soul Pleaser came about, is when I asked myself, when is the last time I really felt lit up? I was like, the last time I watched someone's eyes have a shift. I was like, that lights me up. So I'm going to look for opportunities for people who want it. I'm not going to start coaching people down the street, but for people who actually ask for it, I'm going to share what I feel if they're open to it, because I love that. I love helping people have an aha moment. And then it was just little things. I love yoga. Okay, I'm going to actually make the time to go yoga. The reason I didn't do yoga for 5 years after I thought it would be a good idea is because the classes were at dinner time and I had to cook dinner. So I couldn't go. It never occurred to me that I could cook dinner early and still go. I had to cook dinner, so I didn't go. So it's just those little things. If you just notice what feels good, what do you like? What are you good at? What do you love? And if you've forgotten, then you are burnt out, because I had forgotten as well. And if you're burnt out, first of all, you need more sleep. And then you need to just introduce a little bit of meditation and a little bit of me time.
Yeah, well, you've slipped into some tips, which is perfect timing, because I'm sure that a lot of people are listening going, how do I get myself out of this people pleasing rut here? And wanting to know how that shift occurs and what are the steps in it. And like you said, it doesn't need to be a volcano, but from tonight, I mean, just listening to you, I'm having an aha moment. If you could see my eyes closely in my dull, dirty office, you would see that there is a light there, and it's very exciting. And I'm sure a lot of people on the call are having that moment as well. But where do we start? Where do we say and draw that line in the sand?
So the first step in anything is awareness. And so that step has started tonight. If you relate to even one thing I've said, then that is awareness, because you're like, oh yeah, I do that. And so just catching yourself in the moment when you do it. Don't make it wrong. Like, do not make it wrong. All it is something that you've practiced. It's not wrong. There's no right or wrong. And it's just noticing. It's noticing, yeah, I just didn't speak up then, or I said something I didn't really mean, or I said yes and I meant no, or I'm worrying about what somebody's thinking, or like Joy right now is comparing her room to Tracy's room. We do that. We do the whole comparison thing because, we don't feel good enough because somebody else is, I'm joking, Joy, but you know what I mean? Like, we just can compare, and social media doesn't help, and all of those things. And in the country, like, everybody knows each other. And so people look over it, metaphorically look over each other's fences, like, oh, they've got a new header, like all of that sort of stuff. Just notice, like, how am I feeling about myself, and am I thinking about what other people think? If you use the word should, or if you use the word I don't want them to think, then you know that you're people pleasing. So it's the first step. And in that moment, you can reframe it and instead go, well, what's important to me? What do I like? What do I want? And you might not have the answer yet, but the first step is just awareness that you've just got into the habit of doing things to please other people, so you're not tuned into what you want. So that would be the first step, is that awareness.
That relates to even the smallest things like dinners. How often do we cook a dinner because everybody else likes it, even though it's the least favorite meal of ours, but it's just something that everybody else likes, so we just cook that meal? I mean,
Yeah.
I even did it tonight. I cooked this boggy meal that I'd never eat, but it was just so easy and everybody else enjoyed it. So, job's done. Tracy, I think that awareness is also, should we document it? Should we, how do we catch ourselves in it? And how do we sort of move from that to actually turning it around?
Yeah. So once you've become aware, you can document it if it's possible in the moment. But if it's not possible in the moment, you can just think a different thought. So you can just say, okay, that's interesting. I noticed what I did there. And maybe I'll do something differently next time. But if you can write it down and just sort of see what comes up for you, and ask yourself, is this what I would really want if I was conscious in the moment, even though that was an automated behavior? In my book, I can share the link with you, but I've got a free book on my website, and it's called Find the Real You and Love Her So You Can Live the Life You Choose. Because when we love ourselves unconditionally, then we live the life we choose rather than the life that everybody else chooses, because we don't have that self-love to actually do what we want. But in there, it gives you a process, and it's basically a declutter of your life. So rather than your wardrobe, rather than doing the clean out of your wardrobe, it's a clean out of the things that you regularly do. And it has a few columns in it. So in the first column, you put the thing that you do. So for example, one of the things that I put in there was running my son around to all of his rehearsals for musical theatre. He's into musical theatre. So I spent a lot of hours in the car. It seems that all that stuff is on the other side of town, and nobody else lives over here. And so that was in that column. And then the next column is, why do I do it? And the answer was, because I just love seeing him do what he loves. It just lights me up to see what he does. So the next column is keep, get rid of, or modify. So that one was definitely a modify, where I got my husband to start to help more. And I did find some other mothers, and I actually got brave enough to ask for help, because sometimes we just roll up our sleeves and do everything ourselves because we worry about what someone might think if we ask for help. They might not think that we've got it all together. So I actually modified that technique, that particular task. One of the other things that was on the list for me was going to parties that I actually don't enjoy. And then I was like, why do I do it? To be nice, so I don't offend anyone. Keep, modify, or stop doing. And that's big. That is big. And that takes a little while and a bit of courage to actually say no. And to start with, we're probably going to say a little white lie, because it's easier to make up an excuse than to just say bluntly, I'd rather not. It takes a lot of guts to say that. But I was like, exhausting to go to all these things that I didn't enjoy, it just wasn't me. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, they were having a great time, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't for me. So if you do that with some of the things that's taking up a lot of your time, it's a very interesting exercise to do for you to work out what to keep and what to get rid of.
I love that. That's really handy. And I know all of the people that like doing charts and lists and columns will be loving that. So keep, get rid of, or modify. Tracy, can you tell us a little bit about the Soul Pleaser program and what goes on sort of in that process?
Yeah. So the Soul Pleaser program is a 6-step. So people who like processes. So my past life is being a physiotherapist, so a very science-based profession. And so I like a system. Like, I'm like, show me what the first step is, and then show me what the second step is, and I'll do it. So that's why I've created a step-by-step system, which works really well. So the first step is wake up, and we go really deep into every possible way that you're making subconscious choices in the moment that is related to this people-pleasing habit. And the awareness of it often will shift it straight away. There'll be some things that come up in there that just immediately drop away because you've become conscious of it. And sometimes that's all that it takes. Then we move on to step 2, which is surrender. And surrender is the most challenging step for people-pleasing women, because the way that we hold it all together, the way that we remain superwoman, where we're juggling the kids, the business, the housework, the looking good, the exercise, whatever it is, we're doing it all, is by being in control. And so we roll up our sleeves and we get things done, and we control how it happens. And there is a much easier way. Oh my God, there's a much easier way. So that's how I created all my success up until the last 5 years. And that is through surrender. And some of you might have started to read about surrender and read about letting go. But letting go and surrendering is the block that stops us from manifesting and creating things so much easier and so much faster and in much more magical ways than the tough way, the way we're doing it. And so we let go of limiting beliefs. We let go of resentment. We let go of grudges that we hold. We let go of our inner critic. We let go of beating ourselves up and being hard on ourselves. We let go of feeling insecure or in any way being afraid of rejection or afraid of failure or feeling like we're not good enough in some way. This is a really powerful step, and people are afraid of it because what happens is we have blocked emotions that we've held down when we were little. So for example, some of you will have had this saying in your house. My dad said, "Don't answer me back." I would love you to post "me too" in the chat box if any of you ever had a parent say to you, "Don't answer me back." Maybe it's just my age, but my dad always said that. "Don't answer me back." Amy, me too. Okay, I got at least one. Yeah, Jody as well. Yeah, so it was like, "Don't answer me back, don't answer me back." So I wasn't allowed to express myself. So I was furious, but I would have got the strap. Like Dad used to take the strap off and, do that. Who else got that, where they flip the strap? So you're terrified before you actually get the strap. I used to cry, so he wouldn't give it to me. Anyway, so I would just push down those emotions. So they are energy. Emotion is energy in motion. So all that energy is stuck in your body. And so in step 2, it comes up and it's only an emotion, and you just let it go, and then you just feel so much lighter. It's usually tears, but it's just tears of relief where you just let this go, and you don't have to go through therapy or analyze it. It's just an emotion and it shifts. So surrender is magical, and you only have to let go of the really superficial layer first. It's like peeling back the onion. Move on to step 3, otherwise you'll be stuck in step 2 for a lifetime, and then you come back for the next layer when you're ready. And then step 3 is follow the signs. So we are all intuitive, particularly women, and you will know this. You will know the times that you've trusted your intuition, and you will know the times you've ignored your intuition. Can everybody relate to that? Like, "Oh, I knew that was going to happen. I knew I should have," or you did act on it. And usually when it's about your kids, you do act on it. You act on the intuition. Often when it's about you, not so much, because you don't have time. So you just ignore it, and then things don't go well. So we really make some space. In the surrender step, we make some space, and this allows this intuition to come flooding in, because we have this inner wisdom that is talking to us all the time, but we've blocked it out because we're so in our head and we're so busy. And so through the tools that I teach, different forms of meditation, different ways of tapping into this meditation, into this wisdom, means that you have this sense of knowing. Another red flag for people pleasing is second guessing yourself. So some of you might relate to that, where you second guess yourself around a decision. The alternative when you're a soul pleaser is you just know. You just get this sense of knowing. You couldn't not do it if you tried. You're not toing and froing. You're not proing and conning. You're just, "I know." It's just the best. Then step 4, which is my favorite step, but you're not ready for it until you've done 1, 2, and 3, is discover you. So the big side effect of being a people pleaser is we lose ourselves. We lose a sense of who we are. We lose a sense of what we're good at, what we're here for, that purpose, that inner joy, that playfulness. We just lose it because we're so busy making sure everybody else is happy. And so this is really exciting. And this is where I see people absolutely blossoming. On the weekend at the retreat, there were women who looked different on Sunday than when they walked in on Friday. And we don't do any makeovers at the retreat. It's all barefaced and yoga tights, but it was just this lightness, where they had discovered themselves and let go. And it's just so amazing to watch, such a blessing. And then step 5 is to be you. So life is not about what we do. We've just got it so wrong. We think life is all about what we do. Life is about who we are being. And when we are being ourselves, what we do is joyful and comes naturally. So you've got to discover yourself so that you can be yourself. And the other thing that happens when you be yourself is you attract your tribe. Because if you're not being yourself, if you're trying to be this to that person and that to that person, nobody can find you. Nobody can find your soul signature because you're not tuned into it and you're not showing up and being who you really are. And so this takes some time and some support for you to start to show up differently in the world if you've been people pleasing for a while. And then step 6 is experience bliss, because that's what it feels like. It feels like bliss to live your life this way. And when people join my program, they get lifetime access to the 6 steps. They're in video format, audio format, downloadable, so you don't need a Wi-Fi connection, so you can be out on the farm, headphones in, listening to it on repeat. PDF if you like to read and highlight and take notes. I know some people like to do that. And there are workbooks, and there is magic in the workbooks, and you cannot get them wrong, because the workbooks are about you and you learning about yourself. So the questions are just about you. So you get lifetime access, which means you do it at your own pace. And you also get 12 months of my personal support in a group like Joy's group here. I have a group as well. And I'm in there answering all your questions. We have a live Q&A Zoom every 2 weeks. And you get an exclusive invitation to the retreats, which are only for people who are doing the Soul Pleaser program.
The retreat, can you just sort of do the retreat part and then we'll do the program?
Yeah, I know. So many people go, can I just skip it and go to the retreat?
Yeah.
But yeah, people have gone to the retreats even when they've just begun. They've only just begun the program, because there's something that happens when you even say yes to yourself. And some of you might have found this when you joined Joy's group. You've said yes to yourself. You've honored yourself enough to actually show up by even joining the group. And all of a sudden you're doing more exercise and you're feeling better because you've said yes. So yeah, as soon as people have joined, they're allowed to come to the retreat. Our next one's in November in the Barossa Valley in SA. And then after that, we'll go back to where we were on the weekend, which is up in the Sunshine Coast in March next year.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It is actually, I thought it was fear of joy than that they're doing exercise, but clearly it's not. As you've explained, it's not the fear of me. It's actually
they've inspired. You've inspired them.
Totally, by not doing a thing. Tracy, I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences, knowledge, insights, wisdom with us tonight. I know that there will be a lot of people just so much more aware. And if I could just get everyone in the chat box to tell Tracy and everybody in the group tonight just one thing that they've taken away from tonight's Hub Chat. I know I've taken lots away, but I particularly like the keep, get rid of, or modify. I think that sort of takes the emotional decision out of things and just keeps it really simple. And I think that would be really practical for people that definitely have a tendency to say yes and overcommit to things. And find it difficult to, downsize their life as such. Tracy, if you could just leave us with a resounding message to all the people pleasers in the hub out there, all trying to people please me and me trying to people please them.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, it's like reverse people pleasing. And just for the record, I don't care. I just want you to be happy. So, don't please me, do it for you. But yeah, if you could just leave us with one thing to inspire everybody tonight to just, that'd be great.
So what I would say is that the best thing that you can do for other people, because I know that you all care about other people, and that is your true essence, is to care about other people and want to serve. The best thing that you can do is to feel good. So just start to make that your priority. Make feeling good your priority, and you will see the flow and effect of that. Happy wife, happy life is true. So yeah, just think a little bit more about your emotions and start to choose thoughts and choose things and activities that feel good for you.
Yeah, that's great. And I can see lots of people flowing through with things that they've taken away from tonight. I'm actually going to stop the recording there. And Tracy, are you available for just a short moment of Q&A?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. I see that there's some beautiful, thank you, Anne, who said happy birthday to me for tomorrow. Thank you. Yes, I'd love to take questions. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great. So guys, if you're listening to the replay and if you have to leave us and say goodnight, that's fine. I want to thank you so much for coming on the Hub Chat, and a big thank you to Tracy Secombe. She has been amazing. Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Joy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure. I'm just